Crash course on climate change issues in Canada and discuss top 10 actions for Canadians. Climate change is a pressing global issue that affects countries all over the world, and Canada is no exception. In recent years, Canadians have been taking action to address the impacts of climate change and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Here's a crash course on climate change issues in Canada and the top 10 ongoing actions that Canadians can take. Climate change issues in Canada. Canada is one of the top 10 emitters of greenhouse gases in the world. The main sources of emissions are transportation, oil and gas production, and industrial activities. In 2019, Canada emitted 730 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent, Mount Colorado 2e, of greenhouse gases. Temperature increase. The average temperature in Canada has increased by 1.7 degrees Celsius since 1948, which is twice the global average. Northern Canada has warmed even more, with an increase of up to 3 degrees Celsius. These temperature increases have led to melting permafrost, which has released methane, a potent greenhouse gas, into the atmosphere. Sea level rise. Sea levels are rising around the world, including in Canada. In some parts of Canada, such as the East Coast, sea levels are rising faster than the global average. This has led to more frequent and severe coastal flooding, which has caused damage to homes, businesses, and infrastructure. Extreme weather events. Climate change is causing more frequent and severe extreme weather events in Canada, such as floods, heat waves, and wildfires. These events can cause significant damage to infrastructure and property, as well as loss of life. For example, in 2016, a wildfire in Fort McMurray, Alberta, destroyed more than 2,400 homes and buildings and forced the evacuation of over 80,000 people. Impacts on ecosystems. Climate change is affecting ecosystems in Canada, with impacts on wildlife, forests, and oceans. For example, melting permafrost in the north is leading to the release of methane, which can contribute to further warming. Changes in ocean temperature and acidity are affecting marine life, such as fish, shellfish, and whales. Indigenous communities. Indigenous communities in Canada are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, as many rely on traditional activities like hunting and fishing for their livelihoods. For example, in the Arctic, the melting sea ice is making it more difficult for Indigenous communities to hunt for seals and other marine animals. Climate policies. Canada has committed to reducing its greenhouse gas emissions under the Paris Agreement, with a goal of reaching net zero emissions by 2050. The country has implemented policies such as carbon pricing, energy efficiency measures, and support for renewable energy, but more action is needed to meet these targets. Top 10 ongoing actions for Canadians to take. 1. Reduce energy consumption. One of the most effective ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is to reduce energy consumption in homes and businesses. Canadians can do this by upgrading to energy-efficient appliances, using LED light bulbs, and improving home insulation. For example, the City of Toronto offers rebates and incentives for homeowners who upgrade to energy-efficient appliances and install insulation. 2. Switch to renewable energy. Canadians can support the transition to renewable energy by installing solar panels or wind turbines, or by choosing green energy options from their local utility company. For example, the Edmonton International Airport has installed a 30,000-panel solar farm that generates enough electricity to power 3,000 homes. 3. Use public transportation. Cars and trucks are a major source of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. Canadians can reduce their emissions by using public transportation, biking, or walking instead of driving. For example, the City of Vancouver has invested in new bike lanes and bike share programs to encourage residents to bike to work. 4. Reduce food waste. The production and disposal of food is responsible for a significant amount of greenhouse gas emissions. Canadians can reduce their emissions by reducing food waste and choosing more sustainable food options. For example, Canadians can buy local and seasonal produce, choose plant-based diets, and compost food waste. Some cities, like Vancouver and Toronto, have implemented composting programs for residents to reduce food waste and produce valuable compost for gardens and farms. 5. Support green businesses. Supporting businesses that prioritize sustainability and environmental responsibility is another way Canadians can take action on climate change. Canadians can look for businesses that use sustainable materials, reduce waste, and have energy-efficient operations. For example, the Vancouver-based clothing company, 10tree, uses sustainable materials and plants 10 trees for every item sold. 6. Plant trees. Trees are a natural way to absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, making them an important tool in the fight against climate change. Canadians can plant trees in their yards, participate in community tree planting events, or support organizations that plant trees. For example, the non-profit organization, Tree Canada, has planted over 82 million trees across the country. 7. Reduce water consumption. Reducing water consumption can also help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as energy is required to treat and transport water. Canadians can reduce their water consumption by fixing leaks, using low-flow showerheads and toilets, and reducing lawn watering. For example, the City of Montreal has implemented a program to replace old, leaky pipes in homes to reduce water waste and energy consumption. 8. Advocate for climate action. Canadians can use their voices to advocate for climate action at the local, provincial, and federal levels. Canadians can write to their elected officials, participate in climate rallies, and support organizations that advocate for climate action. For example, the Fridays for Future movement, started by teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg, has inspired climate strikes and rallies across the country. 9. Support Indigenous communities. Indigenous communities in Canada are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and Canadians can support them by learning about their traditional knowledge and practices, supporting Indigenous-led conservation initiatives, and advocating for their rights. For example, the Indigenous Leadership Initiative is working to conserve Indigenous lands and support Indigenous-led conservation efforts. 10. Educate others. Finally, Canadians can educate others about the impacts of climate change and the actions that can be taken to address it. Canadians can share information with friends, family, and colleagues, and participate in community education events. For example, the David Suzuki Foundation offers resources and tools to help Canadians learn about climate change and take action. Overall, there are many ongoing actions that Canadians can take to address climate change and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. By reducing energy consumption, using renewable energy, reducing food waste, supporting green businesses, planting trees, reducing water consumption, advocating for climate action, supporting Indigenous communities, and educating others, Canadians can help build a more sustainable future for themselves and future generations. We hope this video has given you a taste of all the incredible experiences Canada has to offer. If you're ready to start planning your own adventure to Canada, please ensure to use our Booking.com referral link. https://www.booking.com/index.html?8=7989335 to book your flights, hotels, car rentals, local attractions, and more. It's an easy and kind way to support this channel and make sure you get the best possible deals on your trip. Thank you. Anhub Metaverse team at Vancouver, Canada, CA.